The final saga, the culmination of all the information and background work Oda has done to ensure that this is the greatest work of fiction in all of shown, about the eventual toppling of a corrupt global totalitarian regime headed by Imu, who rules the world of One Piece, representing the Earth and its subordinates, the five elder planets representing Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, whose main military force is the Marines, headed by its three admirals, Kizaru, Fujitora, and Rokugyu or Green Bull, and obviously the fleet admirals, Sakazuki or Akainu, against our protagonist, Luffy, representing the Sun, and Blackbeard, representing the Moon, as well as a revolutionary army headed by Dragon, a military force whose primary objective is the destruction of the world government and perhaps the establishment of something like a global democracy to be headed by an entity similar to the United Nations for our world. Effectively, the final war will be between the pirates and the revolutionary army against the 800-year regime of the world government, who, despite contrary belief, is ruled by a single entity who sits on the empty throne named Imu. However, because no one is supposed to rule the world, his existence is kept a secret to maintain that lie. When we talk about the cancer of the One Piece world, we always look back to the Celestial Dragons, a bunch of hedonistic pigs who think they are above other people just because they are born into a certain social class. Granted, they feel this way because they are protected by the strongest military force in the world, the Marines, particularly by admirals. The slow reveal of the ugly truth about the world government is at the core of One Piece's story, and after over 1,000 chapters, we can finally start to see a light at the end. Although I say this three-pronged conflict, let's assume for the moment that the pirate faction cannot significantly influence the outcome of the war because they are currently not united, especially with Blackbeard. You can already feel this disconnect. If Blackbeard wants to overthrow the government, it's not because he thinks they are corrupt, he just wants to rule the world. So we are effectively replacing a corrupt singular monarchy with Blackbeard, which, if I want to be honest, is probably going to be just as bad. This means the conflict at the moment is essentially, even though it's not really true, right, between the Revolutionary Army and the government. One of the most important moves done by the Revolutionary Army in this war is the destruction of the supply lines of Marijo, located at the top of the Red Line, and its official declaration of war against them by destroying the symbol of the Celestial Dragons. This led to widespread panic among the Celestial Dragons, outlining their spoiled nature, and they were also able to, quote-unquote, save Kuma from slavery and free the other slaves in the process. During chapter 1083, it was revealed that these acts triggered a revolution in 12 states, of which the Revolutionary Army was influential in, all of which were successful. All 7 of these nations declared they will no longer pay the celestial tribute or comply with the unfair exploitation of their natural resources and people. On top of that, the Revolutionary Army is attacking the world government's supply lines all over the world to prevent resources from reaching Marijo, making them feel, according to Eva, the pain of living in hunger and poverty for the very first time. At the same time, the world government has also made their move, first by wiping out Lucia from the map. If you remember, there were 8 nations who successfully rebelled, but I only mentioned 7. This is because one of them was wiped off the face of the earth. They were erased from the world by a weapon the world government calls the Mother Flame. I don't know what kind of weapon this is exactly. Maybe it's the ancient weapon Uranus. Time will tell. However, the fact that the world government is able to wipe out entire islands like this on a whim is pretty crazy, I think. However, I do think a large amount of resources are needed for these kinds of actions, so they probably can't do this too much. So I think it's okay. Because open warfare has technically begun, after the Egghead Heart, we can probably expect to see an overview of the current situation. The Revolutionary Army has now openly declared war on the world government and is actively attacking their supply lines. But we can expect the world government to defend themselves by utilizing their military force, Marines. We'd also probably expect God's Knights to take on the heads of the Revolutionary Army. Although I don't think both sides are strong enough to significantly influence the overall war, I'm still pretty excited to see Dragon finally taking action. Finally, let's talk about the key players in this war. The 5 elder planets, the 3 ancient weapons, Luffy, Imu, and Blackbeard. First, let's focus on the 3 most common ones, or those that were revealed early on in the story. 3 ancient weapons. These weapons are each capable of mass destruction that are named after deities or gods in the real world. Pluton, representing Pluto, is an ancient battleship that was built on the island of Water 7 during the Void Century, where the shipwrights kept blueprints as a safety measure in case someone used Pluton to harm people. However, we know Frankie destroyed these blueprints, but he probably memorized that information beforehand, so maybe we can expect upgrades to the Sun. Also, take note of the fact that Pluton is currently submerged underneath a secret cavern in Wano, and if Pluton needs to be released, the walls surrounding Wano would have to be put down, meaning its borders are open. So when people say Wano's borders need to be opened to the world, it means it literally, to herald the arrival of the ancient weapon, Pluton. Next is Poseidon, representing Neptune, which obviously refers to our favorite mermaid princess 𝙲𝚘𝚙𝚎𝚛. She has the unique ability to communicate and command sea kings. This is very important because sea kings are able to destroy islands with ease, which is interesting concerning the next ancient weapon. It is noted that when guided by the power of love, Poseidon can save thousands of lives, but when it is in the hands of evil, it can sink everything into the ocean. Note also that the Sea Kings refer to 𝙲𝚘𝚙 as their king. Finally, we have the unrevealed Uranus, who our best guess at this point is the Mother Flame, the weapon that Imo used to destroy the island of Lucia, wiping it off the map basically. If this weapon is Uranus, that means this is the first time we have seen the actual combat capabilities of an ancient weapon, and I think it deserves that title. Now, let's talk about the 5 elder planets. First, representing the planet Mercury, we have Saint Topman Mercury. He has the ability to transform into a Hoki, a monstrous boar from Chinese mythology, symbolizes greed and wanton violence. He is probably the strongest of the 5 elders, especially with the Conqueror's Hockey Roar. I thought it was very insane. Next is Venus, represented by Saint Ethan Baron Venus Juro. It appears as a ghostly skeleton covered in flames, believed to bring misfortune or disaster to those who see it. In this case, I guess the flames are used to freeze instead of burn. He probably represents the underworld or something with similar themes to both Brook and Zoro. Next, let's talk about Saint Marcus Mars. Representing Mars, he has the ability to transform into an 𝙲𝚘𝚙𝚒𝚑𝚝, a large bird-like yokai with a long serpent-like tail. According to legend, this formed from the vengeful spirits of people who died in wars or disasters. Next is Saint Shepherd Jupiter, who probably has the weirdest devil fruit ability of the bunch. He can turn into a sandworm from Dune, a really big worm with a mouth full of human-like teeth, so he looks gross. He represents Jupiter. Now finally, we have the first of the 5 elders we meet, Saint J. Garcia Saturn. He made Bonning's life horrible by giving her the sapphire scales disease, which she got from her mother, who in turn got it from experiments done on her by Saturn. He has the ability to turn into a giant spider-like creature called the Yuki. Next, let's talk about the Sun, Moon, and the Earth. First up, obviously the Sun is Luffy. So at first, obviously, we all thought that Luffy's devil fruit is the Gum Gum fruit, but according to Vegapunk, there is no such thing as the Gum Gum fruit on the devil fruit encyclopedia. We find out from the Gorosei that Luffy's fruit has been evading them for 800 years, and that his devil fruit is the human fruit model Nika, the warrior of liberation, one whose antics always bring smiles to people's faces. Next is the Moon. Now, there are a bunch of parallels between Blackbeard and Luffy. When they first met, it was like they were complete opposites of each other, but kind of like two sides of the same coin when you think about it. They both started off as nobodies and slowly worked their way up, eventually becoming emperors of the sea. And quite frankly, only the both of them have a real shot becoming Pirate King. When we talk about Shanks' crew, I think they're out of the picture because I feel like they're from the older generation, and Buggy obviously does not have a chance because he's not that strong. Anyways, both Luffy and Blackbeard embody freedom, but in very different ways. Blackbeard's freedom feels like chaos, stealing, pillaging, doing whatever you want. Luffy's idea of freedom is more like joy and an adventure, traveling with your friends, going to different places, and giving other people the freedom to do the same. When we think of the moon, the only reason it can give off light is because it reflects it off the sun. So when we think of Blackbeard, you can just think of it like a false sun or something. I don't know. All I know is that I think Blackbeard represents the moon. Finally, let's discuss the Earth. Obviously, we can think of Imo as the ruler of the world. Because the world of One Piece is mostly made up of the ocean, we can correlate this with umi, which is the Japanese term for sea. The concept of the sea as a powerful but sometimes unpredictable force is deeply ingrained in Japanese culture. So I think it's safe to assume that Imu has the ability to manipulate water, or at least seawater, which is insane to think about considering the entire world is basically made up of the ocean. He definitely deserves to be the final boss of One Piece. Also, take note that at the beginning, when we first saw Inu, he was much bigger than all of the other Gorosei. And considering we now know how big the Gorosei are, I can't even imagine how big Inu actually is. Now, few last things to take note of. There are two main models of how we understand the arrangement of planets in our solar system. Obviously, the most popular one is the heliocentric model, which states that the planets, including the Earth, revolve around the Sun, which is how the universe works. Next is before the time of Copernicus, people on Earth thought that the Sun and the other planets revolved around the Earth, also called the geocentric model. Now, we can think of the current state of the One Piece world as geocentric because all the planets, 5 elders, revolve around Imu, the Earth, instead of the Sun, Luffy. Pretty interesting. Anyways, that ends the video, guys. Like and subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you guys later.